Good evening.
Hi.
Hello. This is, I always consider one of the high points of the session. And for some of you, you may wonder, why are we making so much of a debate? It's just a debate. And I know in chatting with some of you leading up to this, you said, you know, really the major stars in our own schools were the basketball players, the football players. Debate doesn't really figure that high. So, you know, why is this so important? And it's an excellent question. And if you're to know and to understand us, Britain, the UK, it's a very relevant question. I'm just going to take 2 minutes' time because I'm looking forward to this as well. And I think it's a wonderful question and we're going to be debating the proposition. But in Britain, debate is something that you learn fairly young. You learn in state schools, you learn in boarding schools. It takes a very high priority. But why? Why is there this cultural difference between some of the countries that you might come from and how debate is viewed? Some of you said, well, you know, it's those that really can't play sports or aren't that sociable, they debate as their option. And the answer to it here is rather simple, actually. For us, it's really a cultural tradition that was born out of necessity from a parliamentary democracy. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you understand a parliamentary democracy, you'll understand that a lot of it is based upon debate. It used to be every Tuesday and Thursdays. Now every Wednesday we have question time, Prime Minister's questions, where the Prime Minister of the day has got to virtually make himself entirely vulnerable by standing down on the floor of Parliament in front of televisions, radios, the opposition, and defend his or her policies publicly. Now think about that for a moment. Depending upon which country that you come from, can you imagine once a week the head of your country standing down in front of all its opposition and defending virtually every type of policy, political, economic, social, in front of the nation? And how did they do that? Well, they came up through a system that values, that holds in high regard the whole concept of debate. And that's why in Britain, we view debating as a very, it's really not, it's not an option, it's almost a necessity. If you can't do it, support it. And learn about it and understand it. You're at a university that is fortunate to have the Oxford Union, the debating society, which is the oldest in the world and the most powerful in the world. A lot of actually Oxford students don't realize it's not a part of the university. It's totally independent. Now, why do you think they wanted it independent and not a part of the university? Simply because they valued the independence of thought and speech. And they didn't want the university demanding what speakers could speak and who couldn't speak. And today we're celebrating that. You're going to see something, you're going to see different people than you know as your friends, your colleagues, emerge from this debate. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be bruising. Blood is going to be drawn. But it's going to be something you're going to remember. Probably my most exciting times was not playing rugby, not rowing, but debating. Those are the times that I really remember. And I think for that reason you'll probably remember tonight. I cannot think of a better person to teach a course like speech and debate than their teacher, Nadeem. Nadeem is a phenomenal individual. I knew him a bit last year, I got to know him, and then got to know him a lot better, fortunately, this year. He has an extraordinary background. everything from philosophy to training students on entrance into Oxford and Cambridge, interview techniques in terms of getting through the rather difficult and arduous interviewing that is conducted in order for the entrance into university. He has taught thousands of students at OSA. He is one of our most valued people here. So to me, it's not a duty, it's not an obligation. It's an absolute pleasure to introduce to you Nadim and the
very much for those very kind comments, Mr. Grayson. I hope we can live up to the expectation that you each have for today's debate. We will have a session following the initial speeches from the teams for questions at the end. So I would ask you, while you are listening, obviously, to the debate, to prepare questions which you think will be useful to ask. It is true that public speaking is a very important part of university life. It's a very important part of our democratic institutions as well. We honour and value the work that individual students put in, and I can tell you from my personal experience that the students here today have put in a tremendous amount of individual effort and research. It's not an easy topic. The Arab revolutions are current as we speak. They are happening right now, certainly in Egypt. It's a very hot topic politically as well. So if I can just remind everybody that it's a topic that encourages us to speculate to some extent about the future. Because if the situation is, as it is right now, rather uncertain, it makes for some of the best possible debates that you can imagine. In the Oxford Union, of which I'm a life member, we often discuss the most topical issues of the day. And the Arab Revolution is indeed one of the most topical issues of the day. The implications of the Arab revolutions are to be felt across the globe. And it's not just the Arab world, it's the world, it's Europe, it's the United States of America, it's the Far East as well. It's many different places. We hope that this will be an entertaining evening for all of us. And I would like to perhaps, well, first I suppose, introduce the proposition as the first team that will. Firstly, before I do that, if we could just give both teams a round of applause. As the basic rule, we will not take questions, points of information until the speakers have finished their speeches. Okay, but we will take points of information and then the other questions following that. So, if I can ask the first team, the proposition to...
Ladies and gentlemen, this House believes that the Arab revolutions are beneficial to the world. Our team looks to affirm this. First of all, let us be clear. These Arab revolutions are not a coup. Let us examine what the terms revolution and coup mean. A revolution, according to the Oxford English dictionaries, is a forcible overthrow of a government or social order in favor of a new system. A coup is a sudden, violent, and illegal seizure of power from a government by military, a notable or successful move. Now, it may seem like a military coup, but it is not, and I would like to consider the reasons why this is so. 22 million Egyptians signed rebellion petitions in the last 3 months alone. 17 million Egyptians marched against Islamist rule just in the week of the 4th of July. In doing this, millions of Egyptians initiated the overthrow of Morsi by the military. They even shouted in the streets for 4 days and nights, raising Egyptian flags and shouting, "Leave, depart." Another reason why it is not a coup is that in every revolution there are certain stages. It starts with the destruction of an old regime, which has occurred in Egypt, for example, where people start protesting against the government. Then the country gets liberated from the old regime by revolution, which has happened to the Egyptian president Morsi as he has been removed from power. Then comes the foundation of the new regime. This is, for example, happening in the rewriting of the Egyptian constitution. Anyone who thinks that this is a coup clearly has not understood the historical context of the word. In conclusion, no rational mind can give assent to an opinion which suggests that the Arab revolutions can be anything other than good. Thank you. This House believes that Arab revolutions are beneficial to the world. However, the mood across the Arab world is far from beneficial. Ladies and gentlemen, it's very gloomy. The Arab Spring has turned into an Islamist winter. These countries are torn by bloody civil wars, religious sectarianism, poverty, and starvation. These countries have always been lands of conquest by the ancient Greeks, Romans, Ottomans, and eventually the Europeans. They have suffered harsh governments, military dictatorships, prohibition of freedom of speech, expression, and religion. These countries have always identified their political and social duties with their religious commitment due to long-standing theocratical governments. A revolution is a predictable overthrow of a government or social order for a new system. But are they ready for a new system? Are they ready for democracy? They have no economic support. More than a third of the population is under 30 years of age and is illiterate and uneducated. The opposition groups to dictatorships are not efficiently organized. They have no hope of installing any other government. The Western countries have initially supported economically and politically the Middle East. As the global issues and context affirms, Mubarak, Egypt's ex-dictator, has been a firm Western ally and mediator in the Middle East peace talks. But how can a country consider itself a democracy if human rights are denied? How can a man who has denied human rights to his people be acknowledged as a mediator in peace talks? Or worse, how can a man with such principles, with no morality whatsoever, be considered a Western ally? Western nations should abandon these contradictory policies. They have always enforced Arabic leaders with little public support, often prioritizing economic gain over moral standards. According to Thomas L. Frieden of the New York Times, the USA spent $110 billion in 2011 supporting corrupt and unpopular regimes in Afghanistan and Pakistan that are almost identical to the governments that Arab people have overthrown or are trying currently to overthrow. This suggests that Western interference in the Middle East political issues hasn't been effective. Now the tides have turned, and the Western nations have assumed that any enemy of the Arab dictators can be called a friend. Following the law of unintended consequences, the West grew more and more eager to eliminate the dictatorship without keeping in mind that these countries weren't ready at all for democracy. It did not occur to them that democracy had turned into demagogy. We just have to take a good look at Morsi election in Egypt. He was elected democratically in June 2012, and roughly only after a year he was overthrown by the military on the 3rd of July. The 24th of June 2012 had to be a crucial turning point in Egypt's history, but the democratic dream ended just a year later. Also, Morsi was the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, a political party based on the Islamist ideology. His government tended to be a theocracy, a government led by God. As an article in The Economist states, translating religious ideals into practical policies is tough when Islamists themselves are far from agreed upon what those ideals should be. In conclusion, as the US President Abraham Lincoln stated, a democracy is the government of the people, by the people, for the people. But do the people really want democracy? Are the people ready for democracy? This anarchistic situation can only bring further division, blood, civil war, economic crisis, and continuing international instability. Ladies and gentlemen, I kindly ask you to vote against this ridiculous proposition. Believe me, there is no other choice.
Sorry, I have a question.
Yes?
You stated that the Middle East has no hope, and revolution is not predictable. That's what you stated. How can you say a country has no hope? Have you been to the country? Do you know how the country is? So many countries have gone through a revolution. They once had no hope, but now they're fine. So what do you mean by they have no hope?
I got that. All right, so basic thought. based mostly upon Egypt's past and its lack of success in its revolution. You can say that maybe not so much that it doesn't have hope, but the hope of a successful revolution is not very bright.
Can I add something? If we look at the situation from a Machiavellian point of view, this society is a society based on anciently. I didn't really think that.
Yeah.
I'll take that point and consider.
Okay, you said that because of Egypt's past, right? Okay. So, like I said, every country goes through something. So why should the Middle East be different than every other country? I mean, I try to say that the Middle East is a different kind of country, that there are different kind of people, and therefore they cannot have a revolution and become like America or the other countries.
It's hierarchical and tribal, and therefore they need a supreme leader for this kind of society.
Well, that's what the whole process is about in the first place.
Well, also, we wanted to point out that these countries, many of them are dissenting or coming from or heading to a theology, which is a very different type of government than past revolutions have often been through. Really famous ones are often monarchy to democracy. Also, when we're talking about Egypt and its revolutionary past, you guys failed to mention in your opening speech the fact that Egypt has actually already been through a revolution when it threw over its dictator and it put in a democracy, and everyone thought all was good, but then that democracy failed. So we're referring to the fact that revolution is not new to Egypt. It has failed once, and that's why we believe it will fail again.
So you're saying that when we try something and we fail, we should just give up?
No, but we're saying that logically, when you can look to the past, it's easy to make assumptions.
So when you try something and you look to the past and you fail, you should just give up?
Yes.
that all the countries involved in the Arab Spring have as their characteristic Islam, and Islam as a religion is not compatible with democracy, and I'm going to prove to you that later on my speech. Thank you.
I also have a point of information. You stated that these countries aren't necessarily ready for a democracy. Then how can you explain 17 million people protesting against the government in 1 week alone? And also, you mentioned that the democracy failed once. However, does it not show that they are just extremely determined for the fact that they didn't accept that it failed, but they're trying again?
Can I answer that? Well, days ago, many women were protesting from the Muslim Brotherhood and asking Morsi back. In a democracy, everybody should be included, and women are not included in that democracy.
Women didn't vote.
So actually, 17 million, 3 million, it's and 3 persons, like there were 3 persons killed, 3 women killed. So they excluded women out of democracy. That's not democracy.
Okay, right. Any other points of information? We have the second speaker.
Imagine you're a child born in the Middle East in 2011, the year the Arab Spring began. Just last week, a girl called Malala, a 15-year-old girl, was shot in the head in her school because the government said she was a girl and therefore was being inappropriate. This was the same girl that spoke to the world and pleaded for women's education. As a girl in the Middle East, you're deprived of an education. As a boy, you have an education, or you're forced into a religion. Now put yourself in their shoes. If you were in a country and all this was going on, would you just sit down and keep quiet? The opposition is stating that we should just not do anything. But if it was your country, would you really let that happen? If you are 5 minutes late for Salah prayers and you get beaten by a cable wire, or your mom gets humiliated on the streets because she didn't leave the house with a man, why would you want that to happen to you? Why would you want that to happen to your family? Which is what the Arab Spring is all about. They're tired of being treated like this. We all have dreams, we all have ambitions, we all have something we want to be. In the Arab Spring, these people, when they think of their future, it involves the government. Imagine having that kind of future. Now, the British colonized the Native Americans. They won the country through a revolution. But do we look at the Americans and say, oh, you're selfish, or you did this, or you did that? No, we don't stereotype them. So why do we stereotype the Arab people? Why is it that when they go to the airport and they go to immigration, they get stopped because they think they're terrorists? They're protesting. There's 17 million people. They're asking, they're begging for attention. They're trying to show you that we're ready for a change. And if you keep saying that, oh, because you can't have a change. That's what they're basically saying, that they can't have a change. Because, well, in the past you did wrong, so you cannot have a change. Imagine you in school, okay, you have a class, and you fail in math. You get like an F. And your teacher just says, I can't teach you more, you just failed the last test, so you're going to fail. They don't do that. When they give you something, they work harder for you to get better. Don't judge a country, don't judge a person by their religion. Judge them by their individuality. There's no compulsion in religion. It is not by force. Both men and women, old and young, are gathering in this whole revolution. They're showing you that they are ready for a change, men and women. Because if you think about it, in the Arab Spring, that has never really happened before. It's always been a separation, but now they're actually coming together. Many of the people in the revolution are under 25. They're all really, really young. That just goes to show you how the youth are tired of this. Just like we would probably be tired of this if we were put in their shoes. We've been through a lot, racism and everything, slavery, but we all go through it. So why can't the country get through it? Yes.
I have a point of information. In part of your speech in which you mentioned security controls at the airports actually have nothing to do with the subject, and if it have anything to do with the subject, I'd like you to prove it.
Right. So, the whole Arab Spring is about revolution. They wanting to be equal in the world. They wanted to be not an Islamic government anymore. Now, part of that, when they stop being an Islamic government, they stop being stereotyped as terrorists. Now, when you stop being claimed or looked at as a terrorist, then you can walk freely without having to be stopped. So yes, it is very important, because I think if all your life you've been looked at as a terrorist, you'd like to stop being looked at as that. It's not something you'd like to look at. You want people to look at you as. So I think that answers your question. If it doesn't, then you probably don't understand the subject.
What you're saying is something utopic. We do not live in a magical world where everything should be equal.
Sorry, is this a point of information?
Yes, it is. We Greeks are often we're called like you say that we do not work, we sit all day. Our economic situation is really bad. Okay, I accept that. But we say like, all day long. Do you know what Germans say? Germans say like, oh, all day long we sit in the cafeteria doing nothing. You know that Greece, like, we live in a world. If we lived in a world with peace and everything was with ponies and a really nice place, no one will have a debt. Greece would be free now, and everybody would be driving around with Lamborghinis. We do not live in a perfect world. We have to take some meters. No, you saw what Al Qaeda did. Why not? Why not? It's really simple.
Can you please clarify the question you would like us to answer from your speech?
That didn't sound good.
My colleague said that we should not do stereotypes like stopping the
way people look at
sorry?
us. The way people look at us.
Yeah, but that's impossible. We live in a world of stereotypes. It's impossible to have that.
Okay.
Okay.
I think we need to stop. If it's a point of information or point of clarification, then that's fine. Okay, any other?
Yeah, okay.
Do you want to make a
It
comment?
can never stop. Your group is saying that we have to give up on everything. What kind of message are you saying to everyone that say we can't stop being stereotyped?
Well, can we just take points of information and go to
Yeah, this is going to answer that. So, wait. Could you repeat the question for me for a sec?
I should read in the question.
Why should
Yeah.
stereotypes?
Why did you stand up if you didn't know the question?
Well, I just wanted to clarify.
It was our speech, so shouldn't you be asking us questions?
That's a good point.
Can we just leave that at the moment to continue with the second? It's not strictly speaking a point of information, right? It's on that side, yeah. So can we have your first? Second.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Well, this side of the House still stands firmly convinced that the Arab Spring is not likely to be beneficial to the world, because today, roughly 2.5 years after the start of the revolution, not even a single country is yet on the course to form a stable government. But before I move on to my points, let me clarify something. We, Team Opposition, are not stating that people should not do anything. We are just saying that they chose Islamism, which is historically proved the wrong way. That's why the Arab Spring is not likely to succeed and thus cannot be beneficial to the world. Now, let's move on to my first point, which is that the course of history has proved that rebuilding new political orders is a difficult and unpredictable process with no guarantee of success. And why? Because new institutions create new winners and losers, and high stakes are involved. The awareness of these gives people incentives to use extreme means, including violence. So, those whose interests are going to be undermined by the outcomes are bound to question the new rules. Therefore, we can expect false starts, uncertainty, and violence. Now, let me move on to my second point, which is that the conjuncture in the countries involved in the Arab Spring proves that the Arab world is not yet ready for such a transformation. The Arab countries suffer from poverty. Take the example of Syria. Half of the population is in need of food. 2 million refugees are sheltering in neighboring countries, while half of its main cities are ruins. Moreover, the educational system is poor. According to The Economist, recent tests in maths and sciences are just a proof of how poor the educational system in the Arab countries is. So, if there is not the right infrastructure, we firmly believe that the Arab Spring cannot be beneficial to the world, because it cannot lead to the formation of stable democracies. Now, moving on to my third point, which is that Islamist fundamentalism is rising. By this term, we refer to a group of religious ideologies which advocate a return to the fundamentals of Islam. These ideologies are based on a false and extreme interpretation of the Quran. They reopen the gates to jihad, the Islamist war, which justifies violence in the name of religion. The attacks of 9/11 is just an example which shows how dangerous these ideologies can be. While the bombastic attacks, which are now commonplace in the Middle East, prove that Islamist fundamentalism is rising. Also, Islamist fundamentalism in the political life is common among the countries involved in the Arab Spring. The proof for this lies in the fact that since the 1990s, Islamist parties have captured majorities in most elections and are prevailing in many countries which are involved in the Arab Spring. Now let me move on to my fourth point, which is that Islam is not compatible with democracy. Looking back, the countries involved in the Arab Spring are non-secular monarchies, whose characteristic is the prevalence of Islam. So is it accidental that all these countries are monarchies? No, ladies and gentlemen, because Islam and democracy are not compatible. And why? Because monotheism in general promotes and reflects authoritarian regimes. And how? It promotes a cosmic or heavenly hierarchy. The absolute hierarchy is in God. At the base of the pyramid is the fallen humanity in need of salvation, while angels are in between. Take the example of the Catholic Church. When the Catholic Church was at its zenith, control was held by the emperors and the kings. However, unlike Islam, the other monotheistic religions were secularized during the Renaissance and the Golden Age, when philosophers and thinkers paved the way for democracy. But has any Arab country emerged as a model for other Arab countries to follow? Are there any philosophies and scientists who can pave the way for such a transformation? No. And that's why the Arab monarchies cannot be transformed in one night in democracies. So, to sum up, as my colleague Julia previously stated, the hopeful Arab revolution has turned into a rather gloomy Islamist winter. So, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, We proudly ask you to oppose the proposition. Thank you.
Have a point of information. You said that after 2.5 years, not a single country is on the way to establishing a proper democratic government. However, how do you explain Egypt writing a constitution as we speak?
Actually, the situation in Egypt is very unstable, since very few days ago there was a coup which overthrew Morsi.
Our lead speaker said how it was not a coup. Did you not hear her when she said it the first time? She explained how it was not a coup.
Could you explain why it wasn't a coup? Please explain.
It is not a coup because 22 million Egyptians signed rebellion petitions in the last 3 months alone, and 17 million Egyptians also marched against Islamist rule just in the week of 4th of July. And in doing this, the Egyptians initiated the overthrow of Morsi by the military.
Just to clarify, the people overthrew, not the military,
Well,
so the coup actually is in Egypt.
Okay.
Well, since the army was involved, we cannot get how the overthrow of Morsi was not a coup. Any other questions?
Okay.
I'd like to add that the Constitution of Egypt was signed into law by Morsi in December 2012.
Can we restrict it to points of
Yeah.
information?
It was a point of information. So, as the people of Egypt overthrew Morsi, I don't see a point.
Just to clarify that, they are rewriting the Constitution currently so that they're making a new one that better fits the democratic values.
But the fact that they have to
Also,
rewrite
Yeah, exactly.
Also, you said that these countries are suffering from poverty, so they are not ready for the revolutions. However, they suffer from poverty because their dictators and their current rulers are suppressing the population and oppressing the population. So how, can you explain, please, how removing these governments is a bad thing?
Well, actually, if you look at the GDP of these countries in Egypt, I know before the revolutions it was rising steadily. So I'm not sure that you can say they're repressing the people. It's true that they had major human rights violations. We're going to talk about that later. But while they were oppressing, they were hindering the progress, but not completely halting it.
Okay. So can we get the next?
The Arab revolutions promote the spread of democracy, and democratic countries are far less likely to have trade sanctions placed against them. Non-democratic countries will instead be run by dictators who are the kind of people that are willing to try and threaten the security of Western nations, such as America. Which is why, the Western countries place trade sanctions against them. In a democracy, the majority of the people are unlikely to choose an extremist party, so the government will be sensible and try not to provoke the Western countries. The Western countries, especially America, love to claim that they're supporting democracy in foreign nations, which was one of the reasons why the US decided to stop the Viet Cong in Vietnam. Also, what surprises me is that the Western countries should be on good terms with the rebels, as they supply them with weapons. International relations shall be improved, opening new pathways for trade and collaboration when the rebels overthrow the government. Furthermore, once the corrupt government is gone, new investment opportunities are opened up for global investors. Arabic countries are currently experiencing an extreme decline in tourism. However, this will only be temporary. Heather previously said that the revolutions are for human rights, filling the country with happier citizens and a better environment to be in. A better environment with a happier population, that will increase tourism. The population inflation in the Middle East countries could also create a massive future of tourism. As of right now, tourism isn't doing very well in the Middle East. However, that benefits other countries such as Malaysia or Greece. People aren't going to be seeing historical sites in places like Greece that drastically need the tourism due to their currency crisis. People have been exaggerating the Middle East oil stability greatly. In the past, we didn't have the developments for oil stability we now have today. They did not exist in 1979, when the Iranian government reduced Iran's crude oil exports to almost nothing, or when Iraq attacked Iran in 1980, a fight that ended in a loss of 4 million barrels a day. However, I reassure you now that the developments are in place and have been for quite a number of years. These developments aim to prevent threats to oil stability and contain a range of 21st century politics, economics, and strategies to prevent it as well. Furthermore, the US is not in any danger of losing oil due to the revolutions. The US have other countries with which they import oil from, such as Canada. Canada is one of the world's top 10 oil-producing countries in the world, as well as the US itself. Not to mention, there are 130 other countries that produce oil in the world. The US might not even need to import oil. A study conducted by the Harvard Kennedy School Belfer Center showed that the US would become the top oil-producing country in the world due to the rise in the production of shale oil. The opposition don't mention the good that the revolution can do to others, and they don't see what the revolution could do in the long term. This way of reasoning has no basis in logic or fact and should be rejected. Thank you.
You stated that in a democracy, people are unlikely to vote for extremist parties, right? So in the election of 1933 in Germany, does anyone remember the percentage of Hitler got?
Yes.
33%.
The March 1933 elections.
Sorry?
The March 1933 elections.
He got 33%.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, it's not. They're not. Hitler did not do a coup. It was with the election.
Excuse me. I've taken history in the past 2 years, and I know my facts. He did not have 33% in the March 1933 elections.
She did not have 33% in
No,
elections.
the March 1933 elections was one of the points which brought Hitler to greatness.
Because she got into power.
Yeah.
Ain't no Hitler. We got 33%. That's a Germans okay.
Alright. That being said, this is another point of information. Alright, so I'm American. And you mentioned how America would be more likely to get involved and is getting involved